It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. A scientific man ought to have no wishes, no affections, a mere heart of stone. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. To kill an error is as good a service as, and sometimes even better than, the establishing of a new truth or fact. Man tends to increase at a greater rate than his means of subsistence. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one. A fair result can be obtained only by fully stating and balancing the facts and arguments on both sides of each question. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. Man in his arrogance thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. A moral being is one who is capable of reflecting on his past actions and their motives, of approving of some and disapproving of others. In the struggle for survival, the fittest win out at the expense of their rivals because they succeed in adapting themselves best to their environment. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. The very essence of instinct is that it's followed independently of reason. We must, however, acknowledge, as it seems to me, that a man with all his noble qualities still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. It is always advisable to perceive clearly our ignorance. The more one thinks, the more one feels the hopeless immensity of man's ignorance. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. I see no good reasons why the views given in this volume should shock the religious feelings of anyone. An understanding of the history of culture, in fact, of the natural history of man, is not a mere accessory, it is rather a condition of life. We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized that they were inside us. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. We are not here concerned with hopes or fears, only with truth as far as our reason permits us to discover it. We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done. Man in his arrogance thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. A fair result can be obtained only by fully stating and balancing the facts and arguments on both sides of each question. Your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Success is walking from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm.